today, first and foremost, I would like to introduce myself. I am Chartini B. Sigera from BS2 Aristotelism. So today, I will going to discuss the apprenticeship period, the emergence period, and the contemporary period. So first, let's talk about the apprenticeship period. So in 90s, English became the official medium of instruction in the Philippine schools. You wondered why English became the official medium of instruction in the Philippines. Am I right? So, okay, it is because English was first taught merely as a subject because the Spanish system of education was allowed to continue existing in the country. During this time, there were no teachers yet. So the first teachers were army men and their wives until in 1901 the Army Transport Thomas brought 600 American teachers to the country. So, this is the ship of Thomas. The teachers were called as Thomasites, and they introduced English and American literature to the Filipinos. Works written by such as writers as Irving, Bryant, Poe, Hawthorne, Emerson, Thoreau, Longfellow, Holmes, Whitman, Lowell, Chaucer, Shakespeare, Milton, Pope, Wordsworth, Shelley, Keats, Byron, Coleridge, and Locke. These writers became the models of the early Filipino writers in English. In 1910 to 1935, it is generally called the apprenticeship or the imitation, as Virginia R. Moreno also described it as a period of novices with their exercising in fiction making and the rise of the new language. The Filipino writers frankly imitated American and English writers. This fact is hardly surprising since the early writers were, for the most part, college students or young graduates whose literary education had been largely confined to American and English authors. So, in 1927, the Free Press published the first anthology of Filipino short stories written in English. Short stories written during this period were either romantic tales of the past with legendary figures or were imitation of the plots and themes from American and other foreign resources. So we have one of the most prominent writer during the apprenticeship period, Paz Manguera Laturina, one of the most notable writers of the first generation of Filipino English writers. She wrote the story Desire. So we have also Angela Manalang Gloria, one of her best works, To a Lost One. Next, George C. Bogobo. His works is Life High Tide. So now, let's talk about the emergence period. This year's 1935 to 1945 saw the emerge of a significant trend in Philippine literature and English, as Jose M. Hernandez described this period as a time of self-discovery and of a rapid growth. Hernandez proceed by enumerating the qualities of the period. First, we have the writers consciously and purposely to create a national literature. Second, the writers had gained full control of the English language and could successfully manipulate it as a literary medium. Lastly, experimentation with different literary forms and techniques and moods was the fashion. So, there were three groups of writers emerge. So first, those who were concerned with social consciousness. Second, those whose main concern was craftsmanship. Lastly, those who were determined to explore local color. Some of the writers of this group formed the Veronicans. There were many factors which lead to the flowering of creative energy in Filipino writing. Nevertheless, as Herbert Snyder points the following, in 1937, Philippine Book Guild was formed. Its purpose was to produce literature and create a reading public. In 1939, the Philippine Writers Guild was established. The creed of members was to develop a common cultural and consciousness among Filipinos. In 1940, the Commonwealth Literary Award was established. The Japanese occupation of 1945 to 1945 brought this flowering of Philippine literature in English to an abrupt close. The literary works that were produced were published abroad. Although the Japanese occupation years produced little literary works of significance, the period was to become a rich source of subject matter in the succeeding period. The Emergence period saw the shift from romantic idealism to romantic realism. This realism reached a climax in the story of Manuel E. Arguella, N. V. M. Gonzalez, and Nick Joaquin, who wrote effective portrayals of Filipino life evocative of rustic sense, rising artistic value, and significance. During this period, we have the notable writers. These are Ida Rivera Ford. She wrote Love in the Corn Husk. Also, we have Jose Garcia Villa. He wrote God Said I Made a Man. And lastly, we have I.V. Malari. He wrote Pliant Like the Bamboo. So lastly, let's talk about the contemporary period. On July 4, 1946, the United States declared the Philippines a new nation with this grant of political freedom. Most writers became more perspective of what was going on in the country and the world at large. Toward the end of 1946, a group of young writers conceived a plan to publish their own works, an idea which resulted in the organization of the Barangay Writers Project with N.V.M. Gonzalez as its first president. Along with this, Along with this development, the National Teachers College offered a 3-unit course. In 1949, contemporary Philippine literature was offered as a research course for graduate classes. In 1951, the Bureau of Civil Service included Philippine literature as a subject to be covered in the civil service examination for teachers. The literature of this period is marked by the following quantities. Filipino writers are still sensitive to literary fashions abroad, especially from the United States. For decades, the Filipino had been exposed to the mass culture of the Americans. This was even more so after the war. Some might question the value of this fact in relation to Filipino culture, but it is a fact which cannot be denied. Second, more incentives were offered to create effort. The Blanca Memorial Award, the Republic Cultural Heritage Award, the Philippine Free Press Short Story Contest, and the Stonehill Award were very attractive and incentives. Third, The writers have a better knowledge of their craft. Fourth, guerrilla stories and liberation stories began to appear early during this period. Next, in 1964, the Philippine Republic created the National Commission of Culture, and in March of the same year, a USES-sponsored symposium of writers was organized, and as a result, the following guidelines for writers were formulated. Be more responsible to society. Literature has to be responsible to itself. Development artistry without being propagandistic. Incorporate and not merely communicate values. Become subjects and not merely object of history. Lastly, continue the search for identity. Short story is the most popular form during this period. The notable writers of contemporary period. These are Kirena Pulutan Tovera. She wrote the short story Virgin. Also, we have Carlos A. Angeles. He wrote The Last Miracle. Jose Garcia Villa. He wrote the story When the World Shall Come to an End. And lastly, Christine Montella Dorfy, she wrote I Learned to Love Manila After Leaving Her. That's all. Thank you.